During the prehistoric times, theater in the Philippines was in the form of indigenous rituals, verbal jousts or games, or songs and dances to praise the gods. So according to early chroniclers, prehistoric dramas consisted of three elements: myth, mimesis, and spectacle. Now, these mimetic performances mostly dramatized primitive rituals and epic poetry about deities and mythical legends, where the spirit of the deities would seemingly possess the babaylans, or the Catalonans. And during this entranced state, the priest or the priestess would consume the sacrificial offering, which would be in the form of a pig, chicken, rice, wine, or nuts. Now, when we talk about playwriting, the Spanish colonial period is by far the strongest single influence on Cebuano theater. And it was because during this 333-year period, the Spaniards introduced to the islands the Catholic religion and a European way of life, which gradually merged with the indigenous culture to form what is now known as lowland folk culture. New dramatic forms were introduced, and a whole array of dance steps and performances and new aesthetic conceptions were made available. Despite these influences, native traditions and the worldviews persisted. The local worldviews. While seemingly Hispanized, the people would so transform the new art that everyone would soon become uniquely Cebuano. Okay? So the first Philippine play, I remember this was called the Comedia before. But let me clarify this. Comedia as in Comedia, which meant play, and not comedy, and not the Comedia like the Moro Moro. This was performed, the first play was performed before a bishop in Cebu in 1598. And it was written in Spanish and Latin and staged by young Cebuano students of a Jesuit grammar school founded, I think, sometime in 1595. Now, I don't remember the name of the school, but I read this somewhere in an account, Cebu More Than an Island. So this is according to, yes, actually I remember now, the research by Cristina Martinez Juan. And then in 1609, there was another play, another Comedia, on the martyrdom of Santa Barbara. And this was the first in the Cebuano language that was performed in Bohol. And the rumor was that it converted many Boholanos to Catholicism. Then later, there were the comedias. This is what we know as, the dramas based on European metrical romances depicting the Christians against the, Moors, the fights. And locally in Cebu, it was known as the linambai, where you have the crab-like movements of sword duels in the play. So the linambai in its developed form is actually a highly patterned play that can run for 9 nights in a row or or even longer. And I remember reading about this in the research of Life in Old Parian, Concepcion Briones. And it can involve a cast as large as 100 people using plot materials drawn from or, freely modeled after European metrical romances. Now, this was rendered in a formal vernacular heavily mixed with Spanish and unfolds highly elaborated story of war, love, adventures, and supernatural enchantments. You have several figures like gigantes and funny figures like the graciosos. against an abstracted background of distant foreign kingdoms. So there would be about like 4 different kingdoms and different rulers and all of that. So this kind of production was a village production. It involved a lot of people, and we have a wonderful study about this in Theater and Society, Society and Theater by no less than our national artist for literature, Resil Mojares. Then in the 1880s, a new kind of theater swept across Cebu to counter the linambai tradition. So this was the Sarswela. The Spanish Sarswela came to the Philippines, and then we have the localization of the Spanish Sarswela, which is actually a compact 2-hour play with music. Now, the Sarswela that was introduced to Cebu by companies like Navarro and Balzofiori was there, but the Cebuanos also staged their own versions. So many of these Sarswelas were staged at Teatro Junquera, which is actually the first playhouse of Cebu, and the precursor of what the other theaters that lined Colon Street. It was there, like you had Vision Theater, you had Oriente Theater, and all of these different theaters. Now, it was in this theater that important Cebuano plays were staged, like ang Paghigugma sa Yutang Natauhan by Vicente Soto, El Muñeco Roto by Benaventura Rodriguez, and even Nagunuban sa Langit by Piux Cabahar. I would also like to note at this point that here, Soto provided Cebu with an alternative to the imported Spanish Sarswelas, albeit there was already a localization of that, because Soto thought that these plays, like the linambai, were inaccessible to the public, not only in terms of language, but also irrelevant in terms of subject matter and themes. And how very true that was. So this was the advent of vernacular plays that used specific local settings and alluded to local personalities and events, and it was also when realism became a major characteristic of the script. In the half century of American rule and the decades that followed, the Cebuanos were bombarded with foreign influences. So there were a whole lot of movements. So there was a new matrix of movements based on the idea, or specifically the ideology of spectacle and profit. So you had the vaudeville, or what we call in Cebuano the Bodabil. So this Bodabil is a catch-all term for the wide array of entertainment forms like song and dance. And you had animal acts and magic acts and, dancing girls. So the Bodabil was fast, funny, and very, very light entertainment. Bodabil also became indigenized as Filipino performers began to adapt to the new form. For instance, Luis Borromeo, better known as Lou Borromeo, returned from the United States and Canada sometime in 1921, and he introduced the classic jazz music. And actually, he organized a full company of dancers, singers, and staged several presentations, including, let me remember, Foolish Wives and Noche de Jazz. Noche de Jazz. Okay, so, and they also toured around many places bringing this entertainment. After World War II, the Cebuano performing arts was quite erratic, having, ups and downs. And there was great restlessness and financial frustration. And it seemed that the war sounded a death knell to theater, or for theater in Cebu, as there were movies. Okay, there were already movies and radio soap operas. So the local theater would cease to have popularity and resonance. And it was not like the days of the linambai and the Sarswela when everybody flocked to the theater. So that was the difference. And even though I was not born during that time, I sound like it, but I've read a lot about it and I've heard a lot about this. But in the 60s and the 70s, with the help of cultural workers, the theater, they flourished again and became a medium for social and political reform. So mainly you have the initiative of the Manila-based PETA. PETA is Philippine Educational Theater Organization. And so because of this initiative, you had community theater groups that were being established all throughout Cebu. There were several groups like Entablado, that was organized, I think, sometime in 1975, which held playwriting workshops and staged socially relevant Cebuano plays. Another group, which was Bantawan, engaged grassroots communities in development theater. And in the 1980s, there were several organizations like Teatro Cebu, Banaag, and the People Arts Development Center, focusing on proletarian art. And then after that, after the Marcos period, there were experimental and realist plays, but they were more school-based theater organizations. And, well, who does not know Dr. Orlando Magno, who was based at the University of Cebu, but he also taught with the University of San Carlos. And Dr. Magno had produced and directed many plays like Ang Tao, Dili Ko Na Lang Tason, Lawa sa Alimpatakan, Juan Tamban, and Maria Cacao. I think this Maria Cacao was the one by Rudy Aviles. And there was also a group upstage of University of the Philippines, Cebu. The playwrights during this period were Al Evangelio and Alan Jaime Rabaya, who wrote, directed, and produced many plays for stage and television. And we also have Rudy Aviles, who has written many plays that engage different sectors, from the academe to the grassroots. Our contemporary playwrights who are very active today are, of course, Rudy Aviles, Monsignor Agustin Angcajas, Linda Faigao Hall, who is based in New York but comes to the Philippines every year except for during the pandemic. She established the DNP playwriting workshop and has encouraged playwriters, aspiring playwriters to come up with works and be staged. And then we have Emmanuel Jones Mante and Haidee Palapar, also Christian Ray Licen of so we have a good set of contemporary playwrights. And this documentary actually is good because you have discussions with each of these playwrights regarding the playwriting scene. So actually, we also have scripts at the Cebuano Studies Center that students or scholars can use for their studies on the Cebuano playwrights. And, they can focus on different playwrights, even the triumvirates of, Buenaventura Rodriguez, Florentino Borromeo, and of course Piux Cabahar. I'm actually working on the oeuvre of Piux Kabahar, but focused more on his comic plays. I am Hope Sabanpanyu of the University of San Carlos Cebuano Studies Center.
I think when you're exposed to writing, you get to see what messages or what things are needed to be said, whether it was in poetry or in play, through play. I had to say it. It's not so much as an imposition, but it's more like I felt I had to really put it out there to say it. It's my voice. I was using my voice, and so many things need to be said. And one of the best ways actually to right away put out your message and get the feedback is through theater. Yun na. I think formally what started me into the field of drama and playwriting was because formally it started with an invitation that UP Cebu put out to the public, especially to the schools, and I was teaching then at USC, and they had this workshop on playwriting, and it was, I think, for 2-3 days. And the end of that is they will choose 3 playwrights that they're going to fund for their plays to be staged. I applied for that, I got in, and I was really very trying hard yung ko ato ma'am. Some would just write and not finish it, but and we were assigned, by the way, to a mentor, and luckily my mentor was also TH like me. That was Sir Rudy Aviles. That was my first introduction to Sir Rudy Aviles, and he was part of that scene, at the time that when drama or theater in Cebu was really at its peak. And this the latter part of 1980s and the 90s. And so I was really trying hard. I finished it, no matter how busy I was actually with teaching and the other things that I was also doing. I finished it, and luckily I got chosen as one of the 3 who will be funded to stage the play. And when we staged the play, of course, I took I invited my very own students in USC, and we staged that play, and I think that started it. Yeah, but I was already with the women in literary arts, and even in Willa, only a few of the women writers went into drama actually. So I felt I was, in a sense, creating already my niche also with Willa and with the women writers in Cebu, by also sort of giving a focus now, or giving an interest in drama or playwriting. So initially, when I write plays, actually early, I never thought really I was a playwright and I had really this function or the role. I just have some things that I wanted to say, and I felt that was my truth. That was the truth. I had to say that. I think when you're exposed to writing, because I was exposed to other genres at the time also, you get to see what messages or what things are needed to be said to your fellow Cebuanos. I was only thinking of the fellow Cebuanos, of course, because I wanted to write also using the Cebuano language, and that was so I felt that I had something really to say, and I wanted to say it to them, and it was important that I say it to them. And whether it was in poetry or in play, through play, I had to say it. And So in a sense, it was like my conscience also telling me my sense of what is right and wrong, I guess, that I wanted to. It's not so much as an imposition, but it's more like I felt I had to really put it out there to say it. It's my voice. I was using my voice. I guess the role of the playwrights now to also preserve tradition. I wanted to continue. For example, I wrote a script about the sugat, no? And that's one of the religious traditions we have in Cebu. And even here in the city, we're still continuing to practice that after Holy Week, no? Right after Holy Week. And I like the trying to piece out together the narrative, the story about Christ, but this time I wanted to focus because I'm a woman, and so I was looking for a woman figure also to highlight, and there's no other one, of course, but the Blessed Virgin Mary, and wanted to give her story, to give it a voice. So I'm using tradition in the sense, using the sugat play to do that. So I made a sort of different kind of direction or perspective towards the sugat play, but at the same time still retaining the tradition of the sugat. So I have been doing that before the pandemic. I started doing that before the pandemic was put on hold during the pandemic. But now, because slowly we're returning, last, when was that, April, I did that again in my parish, and I put it in my head that maybe this is also the way to tell the people what is my truth, no? And although you would say it's now in couch in the Catholic setting or tradition, but yes, so it's really about expressing, you know, what I felt was the truth, what my truth was, and at the same time, the role, probably my role now would be as a purveyor of tradition. We have so many really wonderful traditions in Cebu. Performing, actually, in the performing arts and in drama, for example, I do even want to, ambitious now, to think that I really want to create my own linambai at some point, and I want to also bring back, because we have traditions, like I work in a district in Cebu that's very, very culturally rich. And so we have this fiesta, and I want to bring back the story, because I heard a story about the life of John the Baptist and how before they really had that several nights of that match with the nights of the novena, and they play the life of Saint John the Baptist. They really have this part down where they cut off his head, the blood will really and spill good, and then there's blood. And I want to bring that, and the people were so, the old people telling that to me, they were so like happy, reminiscing about what they remembered in their childhood, watching these plays. So I want to bring that also back to the district where it all started. So mga things like that, ma'am. I just wanted to bring these traditions back. I felt this is part of our identity as a Cebuano, and sayang kumawa niya with just because the attention span of our young people nor our children dili na as long as what we want it to be when they watch a play. So nindot na siya tingali balikon. I want to go on that, but the spin tingali would be putting it in the perspective or mga issues. I bring in the issues of the time. I remember in high school, I had access to the USIS library, and that was for free. I already loved reading, and one of my access at the time was in the USIS library. I read a play by Rita Dove, and it was so beautifully written. But then, when I already hook up my MA units for literature, I was also introduced to, because of the courses offered in that program. I was already introduced to Shakespeare. I was also introduced to, of course, you have the si Wilfredo Maria Guerrero, sila ni Alberto Florentino. The world is an apple, matingan ito niya. Then I, of course, was introduced to the Cebuano Playwrights. Of course, even sila ni the longer or full-length plays of Benaventura Rodriguez. That's also different, I guess, in drama than in short stories. Okay, I don't know. Maybe because I had those trainings even before or simultaneous with when I read already the mga scripts, no, not scripts, but the plays yun, the collection. If I read na ko plays, I think also about how they're going to be staged. Sa natong problem mo nang hinay atong ko ano or gamay ra atong maput out because gamay ra ang tao ng trabaho. Beautiful thing, I think the wonderful thing about our playwrights today here in Cebu is that they have an access also to staging their works, no? If we're talking of Monsignor Agustin Angcahas's plays, because he's a priest, he has access to the archdiocese, no? That's like his captured audience because he's writing plays for evangelization. And especially because he's assigned to a place where he can be flexible with the space, but he really created an intimate theater type of setup. So he was able to do that and he can stage it there. And then he's offering also his plays as an alternative way of doing recollections, for example. So that works because people are now, I'm not saying that it's boring, no, but sometimes you really need a different way of presenting things. So even the concepts, the Catholic beliefs and practices, imo na i-present in a very creative way. That's already the demand of the time niya. So, nindot kayo nga because he's offering this place as a way to do recollection. So, he has these things in his kanang there, right in front of him. He really grabbed that opportunity. So, that's the thing with your thing. On the other hand, our playwrights in the academe, they're also the teachers of curriculum, the arts and design, for example. There is the demand that they really put up kaning mga plays. So they're really tapping into that using the access to the different facilities of the schools and of their students, no? And training, that's also a way of training their students into theater. They're also doing that, and they're the ones also writing the scripts sometimes. So nindot kay nagpadayon paghihapon na siya nga practice. Nindot gani karon kay ning sugod na kaning mga nay-access sa theater nato, no, mga leaders in theater. They also now try to create original pieces, no. Dili lang kaayo dili lang kanang i-rehash ang sige na balik-balik nga production nga Broadway nga na, no. Again, there's nothing wrong in that, but ang di lang kay nako ganahan na is because there's the original. Why would you do kuan ba kanang a local production of that? Although again, it's a good probably introduction to little kids, no, for little kids. But for a certain level, ano na to sa tong original o niya at the same time kanang those that are especially kanang written using our language. I mentioned about the experience nga diha gyud ka nakasatubangan niya na diha ang play and the impact to you because grabe ang close kay ka ba sa performance kanang lahi sad na ang impact sa language ana kung duol ka ikanya. I've heard of many kanang who I sit with in the audience nga lahi sa tunog kanang lami sa to siya niya lawom lagi to ang Cebuano pero lami lagi to siya kay because Cebuanos magudta the affinity to the language even if wa kay tingi kay ka as exposed. But naagi na palpable, it's innate in everyone. So lahi isad na nga experience kung original or Cebuano ang ato ang madunggan nga in the place nato. So karon even after pandemic, murag slowly balik yun because I think sad nga of course naapa tong mga in terms of generation, no, kanang naapa tong nagpadayon pa ang mga a little bit older in terms of mga playwrights. But naamay mga sumusunod nga mga batan-on yun. So, hinay-hinay tingalino, they're going to be the ones to continue our dramatic traditions here in Cebu and our theater, of course. So, I'm very positive about that. I'm more of a backstage person, but I really had an experience before when I was younger nga mo act yun on stage, although lahi sa nga experience ba, you know how the entire process tingali of the production. That's a invaluable knowledge also that you can tap on when you write a play. So any experience that you think will help you in the writing, whether it's the production or whether it's the reading, you should avail of that. One should avail of that. Whether it's a kind of play combine siya with the media arts like a film, no? Na may mga plays na my play katong sa SM had a combination already of a short film mantingali and then embedded into the play. So whether nga na lahi gyud na kanang makakita ka nga gi-stage siya. But of course not everyone has access to these things. But even if kanang community play, I think I grew up with that gani kanang in the 1980s. Although I live in the city all my life, but napatoy time nga mangibitar sila og kanang taga-radyo or mag-play sila, mag-set up lang stage dito, ipista sa amuan yung tanaw sad ko. And of course, my exposure with radio plays also nga maminaw la ko sa yusbuntag mata ko kay nagsunod yung ko ana. These are already for me exposure no niya. It helps open up that imagination no niya. Seeing that link between a script to the stage, that helps already. Although of course there are plays that we will never get to watch on stage no. Diha nakakutob sa libro okay ra pud na no. That helps actually in knowing the process of writing, how dialogue actually carries for example an action forward nga na makakuha na kag exposure ana by reading. But internet nowadays are also kanang in YouTube for example uploading things there nga from plays gyud niya. Naatay mga access karon sa mga plays for a very short period of time. I-open nila niya. Mukuan ka. Grab that. I think people should grab that opportunity, no? And I think it's also important that those who want to become playwrights or just be part of the play, no? The experience of staging. The many stage plays you can watch, the better. And next would be being part of a production, to know the production process, no. Even the technicals, interesting man sana lights, sounds, how the lights play when emotions or sana scene siya. This is very interesting also. Even in translation, if they can also be part of a project that will translate plays. Para na ko be exposed lang yun. And of course the trainings that are offered if there are. Kuan yun na. Grab that opportunity.
We take inspiration from the very fact that a developmental approach to theater will also give us a better and a clearer picture on the importance and the relevance of theater, especially when you talk about bringing it down to the grassroots. Because they might just think of theater as something like, ay, kanang kata-kata, sayo-sayo ra na, arte-arte ra na. I mean, what they see on TV, on different social media platforms, may not be really what should be, the kind of aesthetic experience that one should immerse in. I do believe personally that the audience should not just be this passive audience. They have to make sense of what they see on stage. They have to participate. I believe that theater, through this project that we have entitled Kabataan sa Kalambuan, empowering the youth through community theater, will pave the way for more TFD-related projects. And I hope that we'll really succeed in this endeavor in bringing out a different kind of theater experience, that which is participatory and collaborative. And that is where I see myself in, say for example, 5 to 10 years from now, to continue the legacy of Ma'am Nene Pasilan, Sir Rudy, and the other TFD practitioners we have, because again, to give us really this beautiful picture of what it is like, the theater scene in Cebu, then TFD should be one of them. And siguro that's where we will, and that's where I will start from. Good afternoon, I'm Christian Ray Licen, and I'm currently connected with Cebu Technological University, being designated as the chairperson of English Literary Arts, and also the Associate Dean of the Arts. And I consider myself really as a theater enthusiast and a novice, especially in the aspect of playwriting. My theater journey started way back in high school at CIC Mandaue, and I was the president of this theater arts group. So they elected me president, so I was so happy as well to really get the opportunity to be trained by my advisor at that time, Mrs. Beronke. And also we've had like training with the late Daisy Baad, because as far as I can remember, we were set to stage a play, Immaculadista, of course, imbibing the values of being an Immaculadista. So that was a play I did, the first play, which I co-wrote and directed as well. And so when it was finally mounted on stage, yes, that was the very fulfilling accomplishment that I had. And it was the reason for them to really bestow the Best in Theater, Best in Performing Arts Award on me. And that somehow became my motivation, along with my Best English Award, to pursue BA Literature at Cebu Normal University. And it was in this time of my life that I had very good grounding in terms of the literary aspect of the writing. But unfortunately, I was not able to really focus on theater because I was more into poetry, short story, you know how it was when you felt like exploring the different literary genres. But then I never got totally disconnected from drama and theater, because I met Emmanuel somewhere between 2010 and 2014, and then we reconnected. And then Emma and Mante pitched the idea, why don't you write plays again? Because more or less we've been together in CNU. I wrote something for a film, and that actually won in our in CNU's Pista sa Puting Tabil. So Emman was the one who really influenced me to write again, and this time for a dramatic performance. Dr. Espina gave me a very Herculean task, and that was to trace the status of community theater in Cebu. And so she gave me leads and names, of course, and that's why I again contacted Emma, being my confidant in the local theater scene. And Emma hooked me up to, of course, Sir Rudy, and that was really the second time that I would meet Sir Rudy. That Sir Rudy led me to Ma'am Nene Pasilan. And it was at that very moment that I realized that, you know, we already had this theater, TFD, that's Theater for Development, community theater kind, which was started during the martial law years. and which very well address the plight of the poor and the marginalized, and of course these sectors really living on the fringes of society. And I was very fascinated with the idea of theater for development, which is why after I wrapped it up in a very short article on Sir Rudy's and Ma'am Basilan's TFD experience, and then I said, well, this should really land in the books and somewhere, I realized that how come that I haven't learned that these forms of theater existed. And so it was Ma'am Nen who also, motivated me and told me now, hey, Christians, your generation, somehow you have to really continue the tradition of the TFD. And so, yes, okay, then there was this short pause again because I had to finish my dissertation, and of which that dissertation focused on the social plays written by our Cebuano contemporary playwrights. And Emmanuel was one of the playwrights I considered. Also, Miss Haidee Palapar, and then Ma'am Basilan's TFD scripts, which I studied. And as an output in that dissertation, I wrote this play titled Kung Kanusaan ni Kanta ang Siloy, When the Black Shamas Sang, which depicted this queer, actually bayot na siya na son who became the voice of reason for the mother to convince the mother to seek psychiatric help, because it centered on a mental health issue that beset this sister of this bayot, because the mother was really in denial that they needed psychiatric help and assistance. I guess that was a good starting point for me to pursue my interests and my advocacy to really bring theater to the local community. So we have this adopted barangay. It's Barangay Opao, and we already had initial engagements with the youth in identifying what these problems are, problems of the day that really concern them. And so through photo voice, we used photo voice in determining the needs of the youth, and we found out that they have a good number of issues, which includes like body shaming. And so we were struck with these new issues such as body shaming. Wow, how can we address that? Based on the photo voice workshop we conducted, because all they had to do was take pictures of the surrounding in Barangay Opao. It must come from really still shots or action shots, which they believe to be a pressing problem that affect them. So with body shaming, we asked this youth participant to explain. These youth participants were very keen to observe how an issue such as body shaming can also really affect the morale of the youth in the community. And so with the results that we obtained, because for an extension project to be funded by this Government Appropriations Act, it really has to have a research basis. And so when we presented that as a research basis, so we got the approval. And so we're all set actually for the MOA signing this Friday between the SK Federation and of course Cebu Technological University. I'm just very happy that even if I can't still find that creative space for me to write again, but I am, all hopes for the project that, this is going to be the kind of community theater that CTU really has to offer to the local communities and the world, because I do believe personally that the audience should not just be this passive audience. They have to make sense of what they see on stage. They have to participate. And that is what basically the premise is in a TFD kind of framework. You break the fourth wall between the actors and the audience, where the audience themselves become the actors in your play, and they will also be the ones to really propose solutions to their very own problems. And so, taking heed from what Sir Rudy Aviles had started, we take inspiration from the very fact that a developmental approach to theater will also give us a better and a clearer picture on the importance and the relevance of theater, especially when you talk about bringing it down to the grassroots. Because they might just think of theater as something like, ay, kanang kanta-kanta, sayaw-sayaw ra na, arte-arte ra na. I mean, what they see on TV, on different social media platforms, may not be really what should be, the kind of aesthetic experience that, one should immerse in. So that's why we're all very excited. Although this is still a forecast, but then the mechanisms are already in place, and we see TFD as an appropriate approach for now, especially that we're dealing with a lot of issues brought by cosmopolitanism, urbanization, and of course the plight of the urban poor. I believe that theater, through this project that we have entitled Kabataan sa Kalambuan, empowering the youth through community theater, will pave the way for more TFD-related projects. We will conduct workshops in acting, in playwriting. Of course, just the basic, because a TFD does not have the elaborate framework, the spectacles, and the other resources, that you can get from watching a Broadway musical or a very a full-length play, for example. So it's quite minimalist and more likely a variety kind. Because again, when we ask the youth participants, what would you like to do? A lot of them would like to sing. A lot of them would like to dance, and some really expressed that they wanted to act. So we will see what we can do to put them all together in one production. I am kind of happy that CTU is very open-minded when it comes to the innovations that we have. Say, for example, we're also going to start next school year our Literatures for Development course, because we already eliminated Literatures of the World and Literatures of the Philippines in the new curriculum. So we replaced that with Literatures for Development, in which we are going to incorporate the idea of theater for development, that's one, and we'll also incorporate the idea of creative writing with the community. So it's more likely writing for, by, and with the community. And of course, the digital humanities and all these new trends by which we bring, more art, given the emerging platforms that we have, and for sure, our students and our learners, hopefully, will be more artistic, and at the same time, they'll be producing not just those nonsense TikTok entries. we hope to really bring about this cultural change through the arts.
Writing for the marginalized is important in storytelling. It could be in theater or it could be in film. The role of playwriting is that you don't preach the audience, but you examine life. You get to understand them from different spectrums where why did they become or why did they choose this kind of life? And that's the beauty of playwriting. The text really acquires different life. The text immortalizes the performances. You know, kita mga good theater artists, we have a responsibility good to the audience because while they're watching the play, these are beautiful lies, you know, but we also make sure that these beautiful lies are correct in reality. And that is one of our responsibilities also as theater artists, educating the audience. So we have to be very vigilant about that. I'm Emmanuel Jones Mante, but I'm also known as Mante. I'm a graduate of Master of Arts in Theater Arts from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. I'm currently connected with University of Cebu, and I'm also the director and co-founder of the Young Thespians of Cebu. Most theater artists, we started as a performer. I think, notably, most of the theater artists that I've known, I think it started when I was still in grade 4. I did a declamation contest, The Rich Man and the Poor Man. And then, fast forward, we did drama festival also in UC when I was in high school. And then the first play that I directed and I also wrote it was The Life and Love of Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun. I was in third year high school back then. And then I strongly confirmed that I love the theater, I love the storytelling, the art of storytelling. And then when I was in college, I was in Cebu Normal University, I met Sir Januar Yap. So he taught me creative writing, so I was writing for film. So we had a drama festival. It was a film festival. I wrote 2 short films, Patalim, which was about prostitution, and then I also acted in that short film, and then Mama Ketchup, the second film that I wrote, and both these films also won awards, most especially the second short film won the Kisumbing Escandor Award. That was in Manila, held in Manila. That was when I was in third year college. That was 2008. And then I pursued theater after college. So I joined semi-professional productions. And then I met a lot of great mentors. I highlight this one in this conversation, that meeting my mentors and being with them, working with them is very important. It's significant. It's essential to my growth, to my development as a theater artist. So I've met Brett Alionar, Beth Mondragon, which because of Beth Mondragon, I had the chance to travel to Sydney, Australia, and Melbourne. This was also back in 2008. I was an actor because I really wanted to be on the stage. I want the spotlight, you know. That kind of love was, I would admit, it was kind of a bit vain, but it all started there. And then after that tour we had in Australia, then I met, the theater Cebuano icon, Al Evangelio. I'd say he was a bully director, but he was very kind to me. He was the typical tyrannical kind of director, would throw a chair at you, would shout at you. But I've learned discipline in my craft with him as well. And then we toured in Europe. We had performances in Belgium, in France, in Switzerland, and in Netherlands. Those were the 4 European countries that we toured. This was back in 2010. And then when we came back here in Cebu, he said that, I'm going to retire. That's what he always says. I'm going to retire. And then a year after or 2, then you see him directing again. But because of that, he said that, you have to start your own, Emman. So I started my own theater group, which is the Young Thespians of Cebu. This was in 2010. I was a typical millennial. I want to do this because I love doing it. I didn't have a clear vision. I didn't know about my community. All I knew was that there were 15 of us who went to Europe, and we had to start creating a new theater group, and that was YEC. So that's why our first production, or our maiden production, was Sister Act the Musical, because I was influenced more into Broadway and Western plays. But that I also had a profound love for straight plays. So the second play that we had, by the way, Sister Act also ran not only in Cebu City, but we also performed in the community, like in Danao, in Bogo, and in Balamban. So we brought it to the community. It was very hard to start back then, but good thing we built a connection with our foster parents from Europe, and they funded us. So the source, other than, they funded us, after the first production, they left naman. So the second, third, and the communities, we were on our own. But we were very reliant on ticket sales. So that was the only, and a few sponsorship. So the first 5 years of YTC was all about my love for the craft and doing it. Like I said, no clear vision or whatsoever or framework. And then 2013, I met Sir Bien Fernandez, and I also got to experience his process in writing. It was very fluid. It was not Western. I'd say it's not Western. And then we went to Camotes also. We did a community show, thanks to Dr. Doris Ogdok. So she facilitated us there. I was about to finish my master's in English in CTU, but because naabtan to og Yolanda and earthquake, and then our classrooms were naabot na mi sa 10th, and I got demotivated. I didn't want to pursue it anymore. Then ibalhin ko sa College of Education. I was teaching humanities, from English to humanities. I found love more in humanities. So then, pag 2016 ko nga, pursue na lang yung kong degree. Ako na lang yung kariron ang theater arts. So that's the time when I decided to go to UP Diliman. I was expecting I would turn out to be a fully pledged director. I thought I was enrolling for an MFA, Masters in Fine Arts, but it was Masters in Theater Arts. So we need to master the scholarly side and at the same time the craft. But then, reading these, bodies of knowledge, I also discovered something that, hey, I also like the idea of translating these knowledge to creativity. Because, the most of the writings that we read in the master's program were Western. It was articulated by Westerners. And then I really get excited once I read a particular theory. And then how can I apply this in my creative work? And good thing I have University of Cebu, because it became my avenue for experimentation. So I always did experimenting. One of the experiments that I did, which I applied in my senior high arts and design, was the theory of Nikkei, the site-specific performances about mythogeographical performances, where I ask my students to research a particular historical event in the towns and provinces of Cebu, and then turn it into a performance. And because of that, na-apply po sa mga students ang cultural mapping, no? So we're also hitting two birds with one stone. And then currently, we had 2 short dance musicals about folk tales in Mantayupan Falls in Barili, and the other one is in Alcantara. the Enchanted Mantayupan Falls, that was about the folk in Barili, and then the other one is Tale of Tale. That was about the folk of the Kugtong in Alcantara. Then 2017, I staged The Normal Heart by Larry Kramer. It was a play about LGBT, the birth of AIDS in New York. Because of The Normal Heart, I realized, that's the reason why I became a playwright. Because writing for the marginalized is important in storytelling. Could be in theater or it could be in film. And then I reviewed my works in the past. It was always about women and gays. I think women, because my mom didn't have a happy marriage, and I saw how she really sacrificed. And other than her, I also met people, they had their stories, domestic abuse, and that really intrigues me a lot. And I feel like their stories need to be brought to light. They need to be raised, respected, and at the same time examined, but not preached, because I don't like preachy kind of plays. Then a project just like fell on my lap, which I never expected that would really go far. Then this friend of mine just saw me din sa Sanshang ko sa UC. He said, "Oy, Eman, hatod takas inyo." And this person was connected with an NGO man, and he was connected with human trafficking, like the Shepherd's Boys in Banawa. He said, "Well, can you write a play for my NGO?" "Oh, what play is this?" "About human trafficking." "Sure, but can I interview a few survivors?" "You don't have to interview, because they made a booklet where you get to read their testimonies about their sufferings, their travails." So that was my point of departure to writing these trilogy, Traffic. And then we had a conflict with this guy. So I thought, these plays will never come to light. This will never be produced. And then my classmates at UP, mga master students in theater arts, he said, "Hey, Emman, do you have an original play? Let's make a play, because Fringe Manila Arts Festival is fast approaching." Yeah, I just wrote recently 3 one-act plays about human trafficking. Oh, let's translate that, from Cebuano to Tagalog. So it got staged, and the irony here is the play was intended for Cebuanos, but it was first staged in Manila. I mean, the sensibilities are not far from Manila and Cebu City, because they were all in kind of metropolis kind of sensibilities that really happened in the city. When we had Traffic, I brought it to Cebu, and then I staged it with my senior high arts and design back in 2018. So I think in terms of significant original piece that I did, I think, like if there's like a work that deserves to be written in history, I think Traffic would be. Because in terms of, I really had good reviews from people, from not only from ordinary audience, but also from critics. And not only that it was staged many times, but it was because it resonated with the community as well, that, hey, there's this, we should have a deeper understanding about prostitutes, why they're there. And again, it goes back again to my trigger of why I became a playwright. It's because it's really for the marginalized that you amplify their voices. And I think the role of playwriting is that you don't preach, you don't preach the audience, but you examine life. You get to understand them from different spectrums, where why did they become, or why did they choose this kind of life? Because they didn't have a choice for it, because they didn't have a good support system. Most especially, they come from a laid-back community where the home was already abusive. And then we had online, pandemic happened. What I did, I had to be resourceful. I had to reconnect with fellow theater artists in Manila. So I had a workshop with one of the professors from Ateneo, which was Nisi Maramara. Then she taught us viewpoints. So what's the objective of the viewpoints workshop was how to translate the traditional staging to the online platform. And I also had to check on what UP is doing. No, naglisod sad sila, no? They were not safe also. So, and then we also had a Meisner acting workshop with Missy, because sa acting sa Meisner, it's very fine kayo ang acting, and then lahi naman good siya sa Zoom. And then we created a drama festival online. And then awards night online pod, but it was live na ang among awards night. Lisod siya. And then I also had, like, instead of dance musical based on historical space, I had autobiographical performances. So with grade 11, so this was also part of the experimenting. They started by writing a diary, about a specific theme in their life or a specific incident in their life, and then transformed it to creative movement. So that's why I called it autobiographical performances through creative movements. Mo gito siya ang highlight sa among pandemic nga performance. Katong 6 one-act plays ug katong mga autobiographical performances. With YTC, I directed an abbreviated version of The Mousetrap kang Agatha Christie also. I noticed sa YTC, I do a lot of Western plays because most of my actors, when they start, joining YTC, it always starts with them loving Broadway. But I feel like I don't have to radically change that. I feel like my mission also is to develop that love for the craft. Then once they start to love the craft, then that's the time I allow them to, or I shepherd them by exploring Filipino and Cebuano materials, which we're currently doing now. Good thing I really had creative and intelligent students in YTC. They're like 18 to 21 years old. They also come from a very good family background. They're in a way mga class A man ni, class B ang mga current members of YTC because they pay to enroll. So I give them workshop. I always start with musical theater, and then napulaan na mo musical theater, let's do this. Let's do Cebuano original. So we had our first production meeting last Saturday lang yun. And then some of them, then it was the first time also I heard or I listened to the production ready script na. And I was so surprised it morphed to another level of interpretation. And that's the beauty of playwriting. One thing that I observed, because the text really acquires different life as long as intelligent lang yun ang imong mga actors kasabot, which I'm very confident naman nga kasabot akong mga actors. And the playwrights were also very happy listening to the plays. Then I always tell them there is never a final script. Because even in production process, when you give it to the director, the actor, the designers, I tell you, mausab yun na. And even in Traffic, nag-stage na ang play. And then si Sir Dennis Sugarol, corrected something. Eman, di na siya. Kaya ako, I've been traveling to the US. Ang pag-approve sa visa doesn't take 2 weeks. It's also in playwriting where I learned humility. That, hey, even though you're the playwright, you're not always God, no? And I think there's also something spiritual about playwriting because the text immortalizes the performances. But it's always the playwright. The playwright is the only creator. And then the directors, the designers, the actors come in. They mortalize the play by giving flesh to it. But it's the playwright that starts by immortalizing it. Because even in the Bible, when God created the world, He started with words. It didn't start with sound. It didn't start with human beings. It started with His words. And I think that's something that I always look into playwriting as something symbolical and a little bit biblical. Also, I'd like to add, I've always been passionate about tragedies. Some people would label me as a sadist. Sadista mo ni si Eman, ganun siyang tragedy. This goes back again to the time of the Greeks in the Acropolis, when people would go to Athens and watch, probably more than 12 hours watching cathartic plays. I think sa karong panahon, most especially ang atong mga millennials, mga Gen Zs karon, they're more into their gadgets. You don't see them like compared to our generation when we get to play patintero, we get to have a face-to-face interaction, we play on the streets, but now they're just really on their gadgets, doing online games. And in fact, recently I learned through one of the plays that we developed this year that friendships are now created online. And it's really a different dynamic when you're doing a face-to-face. So I like tragedy because instead of, putting earplugs, listening to music, you have to feel connected. And because of tragedy plays, you feel human. You get to learn how to embrace your vulnerability. That, hey, we're a human being and it's okay to feel sad. And tragedies also give us like a certain warning in life. Na this could also happen to you, and because they learn from this, so they would want to project that I want to acquire a quality of human life. And I think tragedy plays have always been superior since the time of the Greeks. And that's something that we learn also from Aristotle and the Greeks. And that's what I always tell my students. No, I'm not being sadista. This is my reason. Yes.
If you're really a very good teacher, you can always find ways to motivate your actors. If you want to create a very good baby, so trust the process but make the process very meaningful, make the process enjoyable, make the process very motivational so that you can create a very good product. So that's how we started the cultural work. So know your community, know what to show, and then inform the world. I had to take out what is aesthetically good from the point of view of schools. I had to go to the community and learn their own aesthetics. So I want my collaborators to really feel that we are a family in here, and then open, and then both of us will have to learn from each other. I am Rudy Aviles. I'm currently connected with University of Cebu. I am the director for the Students' Cultural Service. At the same time, well, they call me the director for all affairs because I dip my fingers into almost all affairs in the university. I am also the chairperson of the Arts and Design of our senior high school. Okay, so this is kind of historical. Now, my playwriting experience started as a student in theater arts in San Carlos. I think that was way back 84 or 85, and I was asked to translate a script from Tagalog to Cebuano. That was my first attempt at playwriting. When I went into theater, I thought I would be an actor. But then my mentor, Orlan Magno, pushed me to do the translation. That was the time I started writing. And because my Cebuano was poor at that time, because my framework was always in Tagalog, my family is Tagalog. So I started going to Cebuano Studies Center and started reading Bisaya magazine. So that's when I harnessed my Cebuano, and I've learned like vocabularies to be used in playwriting. So that's how I started. So translation, and then it went to adaptation. These are two different disciplines. When you translate, you just like translate Tagalog to or English to Cebuano. But adaptation is you will have to put the context, the reality into the play, basing on a particular community or a particular requirement of the play. So, adaptation. My first attempt at adaptation was again a commissioned play by USC English Department. This was the musical Ang Tao. What I did was translate every man into the context of the Philippine history. So when we presented it, it was the first production that I felt that everybody could relate to a Cebuano play. Everybody understood the context by which the history of the Philippines was presented. And part of that play, towards the end, was also, we presented the EDSA Revolution part. There was this EDSA Revolution. And then when that part was being done, everybody goes, ah! I could feel that the audience had some sort of catharsis, looking at watching the play, and they could relate to it. Everybody could relate to it. Then from then on, I did original plays. Now, the sad part of it is that I'm very poor at documenting my original plays. There were small-length plays, there were full-length plays, but these plays were done handwritten. And I think I was too generous because some of my friends would say, we need a play for our Filipino one. So I would say, okay, I'll do something. I'll write something. Da, 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 da. So I do that overnight and give it to my friends. Or I need a play for our community in, let's say, Carbon. We want a play about the story of the marketplace and the people issues in the carbon market. So I would write a play. Sometimes typewriter. Computer was unheard of during that time. So I would write and then give it. So that's how I work. So I don't have a complete documentation of my plays, except those that I have given to Ma'am Linda Alburo in Cebuano Studies Center. I think she has more or less most of my plays. I was cautious of documenting my plays only after that. The plays when, these were commissioned plays actually, plays which I wrote for festivals, theater festivals. These were musical plays. I started writing the musical plays when I was commissioned to write Maria Cacao, meant for the Cultural Center of the Philippines, Unang Tagpo. After Maria Cacao, I think I did small plays now for community theater. This I wouldn't remember anymore. This I wouldn't remember anymore. I know I wrote several plays for the rallies in Cebu, for the Alliance of Cebuano Artists and Writers. And then, by that time, I shifted my gear and then started writing at the same time, training writers. So most of my plays in way back 88 until 90, I would always have a co-writer. The co-writer will have to sit down with me, will have to live with me, will have to sleep with me so that we can write a script. So we were always like, we will always like in a venue, and then we sit down and then do typewriting and all, and discuss the story, and then do the script all together. So I would have like 2 to 3 beginning writers with me. In those periods, most of the plays done in Cebu were translations from PETA. Whatever PETA would produce, it would get produced here in Cebu, in Cebuano. So it was all translation. But I said original Cebuano plays should be put to the fore. Going back and forth to Cebuano Studies Center, I found the classic plays of like Vicente Soto, Benaventura Rodriguez. I was even able to direct a play of Rodriguez in Mandaue, the Sarswela, ang Mini, for example. And then I was able to rewrite Vicente Soto's Paghigugma sa Yutang Natawhan. It was a musical this time, which was also commissioned because it was going to be presented in the International Theater Festival in Manila. That was, and to me, I think it was the longest running play that we had. Most of the actors that I work with and most of the writers that I work with, I would always insist that if it's a commission thing, you have to get paid. So that was part of the professionalism of theater that I was looking at during that time. So all the actors were being paid, all the staff were being paid and fed. So the writers were also given royalty that time. So that's how we worked during that time. So, and then 1994 NCCA came. So I was working with NCCA. So we started getting funds for workshops. So that's when I focused on training. I was into theater training, so I was able to go to different regions in the Visayas. And that's when my cultural awakening and enhancement came about. I started taking out and unlearning of being a theater person, a studied theater person, that whose theories were stemming from the theoretical input from school. Now, what I was into was like redevising it so that I would focus more on not anymore the skills in theater or the rules. I was focusing more on the heart of the community. I had to take out what is aesthetically good from the point of view of schools. I had to go to the community and learn their own aesthetics. So even my writing style changed. And because my framework then was a writer, teacher, I would give workshops in the techniques and flow of script writing to the communities. I was working with fisher folks. I was working with working with market vendors. I was working with factory workers. So the basic sector, and even Sakada in Negros. I just had to introduce, for example, process, but sometimes my process does not work because they have their own process of doing things, even the writing style. Yeah, like for example, and this one, I was able to work also with blind participants. So how do you explain color to the blind participant? So it was really a challenge, but I learned a lot from all these experiences. So it was redevising the whole thing. So going back, so I was a teacher, writer, and then they would create their own stories. They would mount their own plays. And then I would just introduce a little that in our school, we would do it this way. But what you are doing is not bad because it is your own culture. It is your own way of doing things. But if we will have to transpose this into this particular audience, we need to do it this way. In 1995, I was invited by University of Cebu to be their advisor of their theater workshop company. Now, my marriage with the University of Cebu Theater Workshop Company, well, I'm so fortunate because it lasted until now. I'm still married to the organization, although because of the pandemic, we had to stop operation. When I went into University of Cebu, the teacher in me, again, came about. I said, all my experience here, I will have to document it and then implement a theater program. It's not going to be just a club, but it's going to be like a mini school. I already had a dream that in UC, I'm going to create a school for theater arts. I don't care if it's going to be too soon or it's going to be late. So that was my intention and vision for the University of Cebu Theater Workshop Company. So when you become a member of the Theater Workshop Company, your first year, you become an exploring artist. For the second year, you become a specialist. On your third year, you become a director, an organizer, and a trainer. On your fourth year, you become a leader and a production manager and an impresario. During that time, it was never like a personal. Theater was something that encompassed the personal and the functional operations of the individual. It was like a holistic development of the person. So that's how we started the cultural work. So know your community, know what to show, and then inform the world. Because at the end of the day, when we have to assess what's the function of theater, that's exactly the function of theater. You will have to educate, and even if we're just a tiny spark, we can always create like that spark and let the world know about it. And I think that's also one area that Mante, for example, he is now handling our arts and design. He has lots of projects doing that. So we do community work. They immerse in the community, create stories about the community, and put it on stage. It's very challenging during the pandemic. Well, I belong to the old school. So for a while, I had to stop. I had to say, like, halt. I'm finding ways and means to really do theater. But there was always the attempt of understanding the whole thing. But I think my mind was so close. So what I did was to get other collaborators. I have mentors, for example, like Emmanuel, for example, is very experimental in he would have all these things in mind, like, oh, okay, we can do virtual theater, we can do this, we can do like a workshop in writing, using Zoom. Well, he has the patience for that, but I don't. But he was able to produce very, very good plays, virtual plays. So I'm still old school. I need to have interaction. I need to be with people. I need to talk. I need to touch. I need to love. I need to be with the real thing. So for 1 year, it was always like virtual, and I was just an observer. But after that, I said, Eman, we really have to go face to face. So that's when I said, that's when I realized that it's kind of different if it's really done face to face. Well, the visual arts was successful virtually, but you cannot do theater, or you can do choreography. You cannot do playwriting and testing the material virtually. You really have to be there. I think I would want them to watch Ang Tao, just so that they would have an idea how an English play being adapted to becoming Filipinized. I would also ask them to watch Bicicleta. That was the coming out. It's about two best friends, male best friends. One was a painter, the other was a musician during the time of EDSA Revolution. The concept of EDSA Revolution was the coming out of the people, and then be open, and then be accepting, be tolerable with whatever is there, regardless of your color politically. Now, in this case, it's their sexuality. It took them like long period to express their feelings to each other, because they were afraid of like the stigma of like being gays and all. It was a first attempt of writing a pink theme play. So it was kind of improvisational in the beginning, and the story just came about. So when we did the first run, it had several changes when we did the reruns. But then again, the play actually had about like 100 plus performances with different actors playing the parts, and then with different student directors directing it. That was also a material, an experimental material for a project in directing, a project in acting, a project in playwriting. Because this is by process when we do. Some playwrights, for example, do not allow their plays to be rewritten by the director. But in my case, I don't. I allow them. Because I believe that when my material, for example, gets to the director or the team handling the production, just don't mangle it, let it live. Adapt it, and then love it, so that you're able to produce it. And they will just ask permission that we would want to change this part, we would want to rewrite this part even. So it's always like that. So okay, go ahead. I think that's the most generous part of me. I don't also own the credits for that. Like when they ask me like, okay, what play have you written? So I say Bicicleta, this version, because this version was written by, this version was directed by. So we started with improvisation and then write the whole play. It was good this time because laptop was heard of. So when we do the mounting, there was somebody like encoding the whole thing. Raina. The same process that we had with Bicicleta. Raina is a story about 3 different cases. One was a closet, and the other was transgender, and the other one was beautician, transgender, and a closet. This one I used another formula, which is a roller coaster of emotion. It was more of emotional studies for my actors, like developing a play using emotions. Like when you're happy here, what would be the middle? And then you're sad in the end. Or when you're sad in here, you become a little bit happy in the middle, and then you become happiest at the end. So I use emotion study to do the writing for this, but using 3 different characters. When I write, I don't usually think about the audience. No, not yet. When I write, I just write. But when I write, I always have the stage as the screen of my laptop. I would imagine the actors moving, something like that. But I have to be conscious that it is the character talking, not me. Because beginning writers, the problem with beginning writers is when you read the material, even if there are 3 characters, it's always the writer that when you close your eyes and it's being read to you, the writer is talking, not the characters. So that's actually a skill that one has to learn as a writer. You move the story forward, you move the play forward, but let the characters live. If you're really a very good teacher, you can always find ways to motivate your actors. In my case, when I direct a play, I would really want my actors to be relaxed, get away from hang-ups, and then I want you to come prepared. So I want my actors to be all giving and unselfish, because when you're the kind of actor who's very selfish that you cannot give yourself into the play, then I don't want to work with you. Maybe some other times. So I want my collaborators to really feel that we are a family in here, and then open, and then both of us will have to learn from each other. And then the relationship goes deeper, of course, and then personal relationship would get deeper. You become the best of friends, like outside and all. And then sometimes when you know now the style of the actors, and when you write something, sometimes the trigger would be, or the pattern would be, getting this characteristic of the actor, putting it into your character. It sometimes works that way. So it's really very good if you're working if you're working and everybody in that community, in the theater community, are passionate and very, very, very open and willing to engage into the process and do away with the concept of I will become sikat as an actor. Because in the years previous, it was always the mindset that when you're into theater, when you become an actor, you will become sikat and then go to movies, you go to like television and all. No, it's different when you go into theater, especially here in our community here in Cebu. Trust the process, but make the process very meaningful. Make the process enjoyable. Make the process very motivational, so that you can create a very good product. So it's the same thing. It's the same old concept of process, positive process plus productive process. Rarely does it result to a negative product. Post-pandemic theater. Okay, I think with the advent of TikTok, with the advent of new technology, with the advent of social media, one can create a story in 30 seconds. Yeah, doing those modes. But personally, the theater part of it is just creating the story and acting out. But I think we also have to learn to live with the new technology. Like as I've shared earlier, Emmanuel had a very good start at doing virtual theater. Okay, it just had to be formatted in such a way that it becomes it's either one, you video for example the material on stage and place it on social media for viewing, or you really have to create that form of virtual theater. Okay, I think that's the direction right now. But then again, because I am an old soul, I would still insist, and it's going to happen. I'm very optimistic that it's going to happen. Let's bring back the stage, put in the lights, put in the design, get people together, get the audience, and let them watch. That is still my direction, and I know that it's going to happen. One thing that people should know, that theater is a live performance with live performers, with live audience. Because when you put it on social media, when you put it on video, it becomes very cinematic, and the impact to the viewers is not similar when you are engaged there in the actual presentation. There is always a barrier. The screen is a barrier to the emotion. The screen is a barrier to the reaction. Unlike actual performances and all, when you get so engaged into it.